Well, the data keeps coming in. It keeps coming in worse and worse. However, it's confirming my models. It's coming out what we thought. That timing model has been very deadly accurate. I wanted to title this video "The Real Estate Carnage is Just Beginning" because it is just starting and it is going to be epic. I thought about saying, well, who would have known? Would be impossible to decide that this is coming. Who would have known? So let me go to my very first slide. Let me just tell you what I'm talking about because everybody and his brother should have known that this is coming. And if you don't know, pay attention because you're going to know here in just a second. So this is what we're seeing. So if you take away liquidity and raise interest rates, what do you think is going to happen? Literally, what do you think is going to happen? Well, we have some pretty smart people. They're supposed to be some of the best in the world in the Federal Reserve and in the government. So if you take away liquidity, raise interest rates, what do you think is going to happen? And then we're going to have all this carnage. We're going to have all these problems, and people are going to say, "Oh, who would have known? You could never have known this." It's just one of those things that happened, and we're so fortunate that we got through it. Well, let me go to my next slide. Let's just go through some of this data. I don't want to make this a long slide, but I am going to tell you what's coming is going to be terrible. It's going to be worse than 2008 because we're so much in debt. In 2008, it wasn't the real estate that took the investors down. It was the debt on the real estate that took it down. And if you had plenty of income coming in, and if your properties were cash flowing like they should be, you were just fine. I went to Australia. We went to Australia every year for, 20 years. I went to Australia that year. 2009, 2010, we left, because our properties were doing really, really well. So let me go to my next slide. Let's just take a look at this. So here's what we're seeing. Do you see a bubble? What do you think is going to happen when you put $6 to $7 trillion worth of liquidity into a marketplace? Do you see that bubble to the right? And you see that circled red? Well, that's because M2 is draining. We are taking out liquidity like crazy. And that is the fuel. That's the fuel for the economy. And if you don't have fuel for the economy, which is that liquidity, the economy stalls just like your car is going to stall. And that's what's happening. Let me go to the next slide here. Now, this comes out of the Federal Reserve electronic data. You can absolutely positively see, you see where that red mark is? Liquidity is going negative. It's being drained like crazy. Do you see the bubble? Do you see where all this cash was put in? Do you see what happened? Every asset class exploded. So I keep getting these questions. Well, what's the data? Well, look at the data. This is coming out of Federal Reserve electronic data. It's about as authoritative as you can possibly get. And while I have you here, let me just talk about this. While I have you, YouTube would love you to subscribe and give me a thumbs up. We do our very best to bring you good data and to try and give you some forecasts, protect you in the coming years, because we see this coming. We do have forecasts, and they say no one can tell, no one can know. Well, how can you not know? We've quit buying in March of 2022 when we saw liquidity being drained. Everyone that bought a property and since then is going to be negative. You're going to be underwater. Now we're doing 1031 exchanges so that you can change your location, but we're not changing our asset allocation. We're not adding to our mix. We're not taking on any more risk by putting new capital in. So yes, you can see what's going on. Let me go to my next slide. So if you like our work, I love your support. We're not going to send you anything. We're not going to try and sell you widgets or anything. But we do like to know that we have some support out there. So let me go to my next slide and let's just talk about this. Now, look at the combination that we're looking at here. So we have higher interest rates with this inverted yield curve. We've got liquidity being drawn. What do you think that's a prescription for? We're making multi-million-dollar decisions. We're buying properties. We're doing things for our portfolio. We have portfolio management right in front of us. We have been talking about the fact that you want to get a quality tenant and maximize your tenant rather than maximize the rent. That's called portfolio management, and that's looking into the forecast as to what could possibly happen. And we're paying attention on these. You should be paying attention to this as well. So we've got an inverted yield curve. It's at historic levels. And what does that mean? So you got liquidity being drained out. You've got interest rates going up. Banks and lenders are automatically going to start tightening, and they're going to start saying, I'm not going to be as easy on my lending. So you see lending standards are coming down, or are actually going up. It's getting harder and harder to get a loan. The banks are very reluctant. Now, remember, we've got shadow banks as well. You know, we've got hedge funds, we've got insurance companies. These aren't really banks, but they lend money. So these are shadow lenders. They're doing the same thing. They are tightening into a recession because they're thinking, man, you know, we're at risk. So when you're at risk, we want to put less and less money out. We're less and less inclined to do projects. And so if you have a great project, sure, you're going to get that done. If you have a marginal project, probably not. If you've got an idea, that's not going to happen. So let's go to my next slide and let's just talk about that. So we've been talking about this ad infinitum. I love that, ad infinitum, for a long time. So this goes back to June. I got this from Zero Hedge. And in April itself, we had a 12% negative year-over-year growth in the money supply. It has not gotten better. This is pervasive throughout actually, it's pervasive throughout the world. So if you think it's bad here, it's even worse in Europe. Europe is just like a basket case. So what does this tell you? Literally, you're intelligent people. What does this tell you when you've got higher interest rates, liquidity, tightening standards? You have to start thinking to yourself, well, I need to start being cautious. Let me go to my next slide and let's just talk about that. Now, I've used this slide before too, and you can see this. You can see what we're talking about. Liquidity drain is going to cause the producer price index to slow because this is going to be demand destruction. So when you're building things and doing things and making things, and you start to see that there's less and less demand for your product, that goes right down the chain. And you can see this in the producer price index. This is why inflation is coming. My concern is we're probably going to see deflation. Remember, deflation is not necessarily just in prices. We're talking about credit inflating and deflating. And I think you're certainly going to see a credit event coming very, very soon. And if not already happening, I mean, it's already underway. But you can see it at the producer price index that we're going to have deflation. Now, I don't know how long this deflation is going to last, because deflation is also tied to our currency. At the moment, our currency, you know, today is September 15th, so our currency is like running right on a DXY, pretty strong. You know, it's like 105, 104. That's a pretty strong number. It's been down to 72. So if the dollar drops to 72, you're going to see inflation. So, you know, we're not selling our portfolio. We're not selling our portfolio. And the reason we're not selling our portfolio, because our portfolios have very little leverage on it and they cash flow. Now, we're not going to panic and start selling things, because for a year or two, our portfolio, which we've owned for 30 and 40 years, we're going to sell it out. These portfolios provide income when the economy slows down. That's what these portfolios are meant to do. Now, if we have currency problems, and you know that the U.S. dollar is under attack, you have to know that. I mean, you can't hardly open the news without seeing that. So if the DXY, the U.S. dollar, as compared to a basket of currencies, drops, well, that means everything that expressed in U.S. dollars gets more expensive for us. That's inflation. That's price inflation. At the moment, we see price deflation, but we also see credit deflation as well. So probably a bad combination. So I've talked about this. Can you see the bubble? Can you see this bubble? This is worldwide. So here we are. We're seeing this producer price index again. This is for Europe, and they're doing the same thing, only worse. You know, they had bonds that were negative bonds. Now their interest rates are 4, 5, 6% just on government bonds. What do you suppose that does to a bond portfolio? you start raising interest rates on a negative interest rate portfolio, you lose tons and tons of money. I've heard that some of the pension funds in the UK have lost 60, 70, 80% of their value. And these are pension funds that people depend on. Let me go to my next slide and let's just talk about that. So let's just ponder this for a second. You've got the credit card balances at our historic levels. And they're at historic levels because people are running out of savings. Savings is being depleted. And they're trying to maintain their livelihood. They're trying to maintain their lives. They're trying to go to grocery stores and they haven't got any savings. And we're seeing that we've talked about this before. If you look at my other videos, we're seeing that the full-time jobs are going away and we're getting part-time jobs. Well, part-time jobs don't necessarily give you enough income to maintain your household. So people are getting multiple jobs. And of course, if even in multiple jobs, these are jobs that are, entry level. They pay 12, 15, 18, 20 bucks an hour. They're not the $50 and $60, high paying industrial jobs and manufacturing jobs. Those aren't working. White collar, this is going to be a white collar recession, by the way. So anyone is in white collar, they're going to be in trouble. And you can see just by looking at this that the savings are depleted and the credit card balances are going up because they're trying to maintain their lives. Now, what's going to be really interesting is when these credit cards meet their max. Now your savings depleted and your credit is depleted. That's going to cause a major problem. So what a surprise! As of June of 2023, we've got retail in the number. What do you suppose it is? And if I've got other slides too showing that the California harbors, at Long Beach, that the container ships going out are down. And here's a little surprise for you. Container ships coming in are way down too. So there is no manufacturing. Why do you suppose these trucking companies that have been around for a century are in trouble? Because there's no freight, there's no business going on. So if you don't start thinking that we're going to have some problems, you better start figuring your portfolio. You're welcome to call us. We do this on a day-by-day basis. So let me just go through this slide and let's just talk about what we see and what we're talking to our clients about. And of course, we do a lot of consulting, and so we have groups that we talk about. So let me just go over this with you. So here are 6 points that we want you to understand is that the total amount of credit card debt in the United States has surpassed $1 trillion. $1 trillion. They're as bad as the U.S. government. It's at the highest level ever recorded. And the average interest rate of credit card balance is now over 20%. I'm hearing it's up to 29% on some of these others. So every time you reduce the balance of your credit card, you earn 20%. So now we're talking about here's the bad part, is that a whopping 47% of U.S. cardholders are now carrying balances from month to month. And the banks love this. Banks love this. 20%. I would love to get 20% a month on my credit card. Huh? Get a 20% annual. That means I'm making 20%. I'd love you to not pay. I do want to get paid, but I'd love to load you up with credit debt at 20%, 29%. Are you kidding? You got to pay these credit card balances off. Get rid of them. The average credit card debt in the United States continues to grow. The average person's got $7,000. Most Americans are running our credit card debt up because they are under financial strain. We've talked about that. They haven't got any money in the bank, and they're not getting enough wages. Wages have been under pressure here for the last couple of years. And the number of credit card delinquencies are running, and the number is past due has increased 42%. Now, that's not 42% of delinquencies of credit cards. That's saying that the delinquencies are up 42%. We're going to get to that point where they're really, really bad. So you need to start saving some money. I might go to my next slide here and let's just talk about this. So here's what I'm talking about. This is where it's going to be, man. This is going to be terrible. So you need to take a look at this. So we're talking about carnage. We're talking about major carnage. We have $2 trillion of commercial real estate has lost value. Now, this is for the people who own it, but also for the people who lent on it. You know, we've got hedge funds, we've got insurance companies, we've got small regional banks, and these guys are taking a bath. This is going to spill over into the rest of the economy. If you don't think that, you need to really start thinking about this, start talking about this, start watching some of the, analysts on, you can get some great information, great analysts on YouTube. But if you listen to the talking heads, you listen to the government, they don't want you to think that there's a problem. They want you to spark the economy. It's going to be a soft landing. I mean, there's never been a soft landing. You know, a soft landing, there's not a prayer in the world that this is going to be a soft landing. I go to my next slide here. So we get this from Jack Farley. He's sending this out. He's saying that the problem, of course, is the fact when these commercial loans are not 30-year loans. You know, they're 5, 6, 7 years. You might get a 10 one, but most of them are 5 or 6 or 7 years. Then they have to be refinanced. And 70% of the ones that are rolling over are defaulting because the value of the properties that these loans are on has plummeted. So if you're a 70% loan to value and you lose 30%, that means you got to put another 70% loan to value, which means you got to put another 30% down because the lenders aren't going to go 100% financing. And people are owning it said, well, I'm losing money. I'm not going to put another 30% down. You can have the property back. Well, they don't want it back. They're not in the business to run hotels and multifamilies. They're in the lending business. And so they're getting it back. And of course, that affects their liquidity. It affects their reserves. And I think you're going to see major problems throughout insurance companies. You need to take a look and see what your insurance exposure is on your portfolios. You need to start thinking about your bank as well. If it's a regional bank, you know, there no doubt probably have some regional projects that may very well be at risk. And you need to see what your exposure is to that. I mean, I certainly would. I'd talk to my financial advisor right now and see what's going on. And we're just talking about this, so let me blow this up a little bit so you can see this. This is the level of insurance companies. You know, a lot of people think of banks. You know, insurance companies have a lot of exposure to office buildings, and these are the insurance companies that have it. So most insurance companies are going to have. Some are going to have a lot more than others. It was very, very good business, of course, to lend into an office building. But who would have expected that? People would no longer go to work. But of course, now compounding by bad governance in a lot of these inner cities, you know, or major cities like San Francisco, there's no excuse for that. And that's the obvious problem is that the tenants are leaving. And if the tenants leave, you're left with this building that doesn't have any value. Only value it has is by providing space. If you're not providing space, you're out of business. You're gone. So that's just what happens. Let me go to my next slide. You can see this now. This is by John Wake he's done an excellent job of compiling data for Phoenix, Arizona. Now, Phoenix in the last 2008 was the poster child for very bad business. You know, over exuberance, buying way too much, over leverage. You couldn't have found a worse place than probably Phoenix, Arizona. But I'm going to tell you, I was here through it. I remember exactly what was going on. Our portfolio was fine. You know, we didn't have much leverage on it, and people need a place to live, and you get a lot of income coming into this. Now, we'll talk about this at another time. If you want to call me or email me, you want to send an appointment, we can talk about this because some are at risk, some are not. But typically, if you position your portfolio correctly, you're just fine. But I bring this to you for one reason. There's a talk that there's no inventory. Oh my gosh, we've got no inventory. You know, oh my gosh, there's nothing to buy. We've got saving graces, low inventory. I'm going to tell you, I was here in 2006, and in 2006, in March of 2006, or I'm sorry, 2005, March of 2005. I was here 2006 too, but 2005, there was nothing to buy. We were down to less than 3,000 properties for sale in all of Phoenix. You know, we got 3-4 million people here, only 3,000 properties. and people were scrambling. This was FOMO was going on. People were overpaying just like they did in 2021. Out trying to outbid each other. They were paying more than what it's worth, paying cash, borrowing, and within 12 months, I want you to pay close attention to this. Just listen to what I'm going to tell you. Just listen to this. In March of 2005, we had less than 3,000 properties for sale. 12 months later, we had 33,000 properties for sale in Phoenix, and it went to over 50,000 within 19 months. That's how fast this can turn. Did you listen to that? March of 2005, we had less than 3,000 properties for sale. Within 12 months, there were 30,000 properties more for sale. You couldn't sell them. It changed on a dime. It was just unbelievable. Look at this. I'm telling you, you need to be careful out there. This is what can happen. Let me go to my next slide. So I took the slide. This is from Anchorman. And of course, he's bewildered. He just had a problem, and it goes, well, that escalated quickly. And that's how quickly it can happen. It can happen just in a blink of an eye. And in 12 months, if you've got tenants in there that are a problem and your properties are collapsing on you, you can't get them out. So call us. We're more than happy. I've done this for a really, really long time. We have a lot of properties under management, under our portfolios. We could use 5 property managers. Done this before, know exactly how to do this. So give us a call. So I'm going to talk to you really quickly here. I don't want to last much longer, but here's another concern that zombie companies continue to borrow, and that is going to get cut off. This is going to get cut off. They have $2 trillion worth of debt, and they control 10 million people. And I'm telling you that these zombie companies are knocking at the door, and we're going to have an enormous amount of unemployment quickly. Because if these zombie companies cannot get financing, they're going away. These zombie companies are just barely making enough to keep the doors open. They're certainly not earning income. They're employing a lot of people. The only way that they survive is by borrowing money. And once that borrowing gets cut off, they're done. They're done. And they have $2 trillion in bonds that would be at risk. So let me tell you, what happens when you take $2 trillion out of the economy? We're already seeing this happen with the liquidity. Let's take another couple, $2, $3, or $4 trillion out of the economy and see what happens to the economy then. Let me go to my next slide. So that's what you get. And it's not going to be a soft landing. It's going to be a hard landing. This is going to be very, very similar to 2008, 2009, 2010. Now, I'm going to tell you, we're going to make a ton of dough. We're going to make an enormous amount of money. But you have to be prepared for it. You have to get from here to there, and I can help you with that. I'm already helping the associates that we have here. We're doing everything we possibly can because the market's going to change radically. So if you need me, call me. I'm here to help you as best I can. I'm telling all our cohorts in the real estate industry, it is time to save for the real estate winter because this is what is going to come. You're going to need all your cash. You're going to need all that income. You're going to need all those extra, gigs that we're doing. You're going to want to look for a couple extra income streams. And if I can help in any way, this is where I'm at. You know how to reach me. You can call. We'll set an appointment that we can get together. It's my pleasure to help you. If I can help in any way, I certainly will. My very, very best to you. Bye-bye now.